Hello YouTube, welcome back to Second Rate Shooter. My name's Eric and I'm going to be giving my first impressions on a gun that I just bought and I haven't shot yet, the Stevens 320. So first, let's look at the model that I actually owned 8 years ago. And I sold it because I really wasn't quite pleased with a few of the features that it had, or actually, rather, a few of the features that it lacked. This example, however, solves all of that. So let's just get started. You've seen the picture of the gun that I used to own. It's got a pistol grip. It's got the ghost ring sights, but otherwise it's a plain Jane model that's really set up for defensive purposes. And again, there's not much to it. But this sample is just a little bit different. I mean, the silhouette is largely the same, but let's just go from the muzzle end. Again, it still retains those ghost ring sights with the fiber optic front, and for this price point, it's a really nice feature. The old one, and we'll get to it in a minute, but the old one I believe had a sling swivel on the front sort of cap to the magazine tube, but it didn't have the corresponding sling mount in the back. It had a hole that you would loop your sling through, sort of right through the middle of the stock, and I found that setup very lacking. It really just didn't. I didn't like the way it looked. I didn't like the way it felt. I much prefer this. I think it's a far superior system for a sling. And so let's just go ahead and also look at the stock in another respect. This is actually a detraction, I think, from the original setup. You'll note that the FDE furniture on this model, the furniture itself has changed a good bit. The fore end, I think, is slightly different geometry, and the stock is aesthetically just far different. Not in really a way that matters ergonomically, but the sort of the bottom of the stock, where before it had a gentle, consistent slope right here, now it has this cutout. And while I think the cutout is actually aesthetically an upgrade, functionally it is not, and I'm not happy about it. But this portion right here, before, I was able to use a cheap $5 elastic shell holder. That's not the case now. I haven't tried it, but I imagine that this is not tall enough to stretch the elastic to the extent that it stays relatively stable. This, I imagine, if you were to put such a cheap elastic shell holder on it, it would be flopping around, sliding with use, and that just wouldn't it wouldn't be something I would consider. But let's get back to the positives. Again, the sling system was a reason why I just couldn't keep the old 320, and this solves that. Another thing was that we have Picatinny rail on the receiver now, so we have a method by which to install a red dot, and that's huge. Even though these have good sights for a shotgun, I mean, it's not a bead sight, it's a ghost ring sight, and I do like it. The fact is that fiber optic is going to do really nothing for you at night, and the red dot absolutely will. So I like the ability to upgrade my shotgun by having the Picatinny rail, and I certainly plan to do so. But again, I couldn't with the old model, and I suppose at the time, I was 18 when I bought it, there might have been aftermarket support. I might have been able to find some sort of aftermarket Picatinny rail, but I didn't know anything at the time, and I did not. We also have Picatinny rail in front of the fore end. Now, I would prefer this Picatinny to be on the forearm, but I'll take what I can get, and I can live with that and work with it. I would like it on the fore end because it would be a consistent indexing point with my thumb, especially like with a momentary on. I see how it'll be almost impossible to do with shotgun, especially because this is where the grip texture is on the forearm. It's towards the rear. Putting your hand out here to activate a flashlight is going to be, I don't know, a little tough, but again, I am happy with it. I'm glad that it has it where it does rather than nothing at all. And it was probably more practical and cheaper to just mount it to the magazine tube. It's a bi-rail, so it has a rail on both sides of the gun, but not on the bottom. Yeah, so those are the three main reasons why I didn't like the Stevens 320 as of 8 years ago, and even up until a couple years ago. They didn't really seem to address it. The sling, the inability to easily attach a light, the inability to easily attach a red dot. All three of those things were things that held me back. And it also has, this new model also has things that I didn't even consider at the time. We have a heat shield on the front. Now, if you're using this for a home defense role, I can't imagine that will make much of a difference at all. If anything, it just makes the gun heavier. But if you're using this for like some sort of SHTF purpose where you're going to have more than 5 or 6 rounds and you're going to have to reload the gun, it could come in handy. I'll certainly take it. I will not be removing it from the gun. Also, it kind of just looks cool and looks the part. Now let's talk about some of the things that I don't necessarily like about this gun. Not necessarily the new gun either, just the Stevens 320 in general, whether it was my previous model or this sample. So this is sort of idiosyncratic to the gun, but I had to take the floor model because they did not have any in stock otherwise. So this one's kind of beat up just a little bit, nicks and scratches. This thing's not going to be in a museum, however, so that wasn't a huge consideration for me. Perhaps the most important negative I discussed already with the stock, and that is because the problem of not being able to have shells on the gun is exacerbated by the fact that you can't have a side saddle on this gun easily. If you'll see, the forend is totally encroaching on the receiver, so that's going to have a huge interference, and you're going to have to buy, if you want a side saddle on your Stevens 320, an aftermarket forend. I'm, at least at this point, not at all willing to do that. That sort of ruins the allure of this gun, which is a budget, if you will. And, I'm happy, even on a budget weapon, to supplement what's there, add a sling, add a red dot, add a light. But something I'm not willing to do on a budget gun, and reluctant to do on any gun for that matter, is to change out a lot of things, when it comes to, say, an AR-15 or something. Particularly, I can build one to my specifications and not have to have excess parts laying around. I don't want A2 grips and A2 flash hiders and things just sort of in a bin or a drawer, never to be seen again. That's a little less impossible with something like a pump shotgun. You can't really just necessarily build a pump shotgun from the ground up, as far as I'm aware. But I do try to keep that sort of thing to a minimum, so I don't want to modify or swap out the forearm really, unless I'm just in a dire need to have rounds on the gun. I don't think I am. I think 5+1, 2 3/4 inch shells of buckshot will probably be enough. If I was using this in something outside of a home defense role, I would just have to carry more on body, whether that's in some sort of belt setup or a chest rig with MOLLE shotgun shell attachments, to where I can have, say, 25 rounds on my body. That would be something I'd have to do to compensate for the lack of on-gun carriage of shells. Now, I will say that would make the gun lighter and easily maneuverable. Another thing I don't like about the Stevens 320 is the fact that it has a gate that is in the way constantly when you're trying to load the gun. I much prefer the Mossberg setup regarding that. I think it's far superior. And then lastly, a negative that comes to mind, and it's not necessarily the Stevens 320. I mean, this is sort of just the nature of the beast. But it is cloning the 1200 and 1300, and as I recall, there are 1200s and 1300s that have flush magazine tubes with the end of the barrel. I mean, I don't understand the point of this. And it's not an indictment just on Stevens or Savage, they're the maker of the gun. It's really an indictment on a lot of pump shotguns. It just perplexes me. The government tells us that we have to have an 18-inch barrel, and that's already bad enough. But, we're going to have this amount of maneuverability. We're compromised by having the barrel extend out to here, and we might as well make the most of it as a consumer, as a gun manufacturer, by allowing the magazine tube to sit out here flush with the barrel. I just don't understand why I can't get an extra round or two in what is already a very rounds limited affair. Again, I haven't shot this gun. I look forward to shooting it and letting you guys know after I've had sufficient experience with it whether I would recommend buying this gun. But first impressions, I am very excited. I'm very optimistic about the gun. I think it's a really good budget option, outside of sort of lack of track record that I have with it. But I think it's a great gun as configured here, to set up as a home defense option that, albeit is inexpensive, even if you upgrade with a sling, with a red dot, with a light. You will have a very capable system, in my estimation, and you'll be looking at something like, if you go on keep the budget theme, $500. So I got this gun at $245 at Dunham Sporting Goods. It was not on sale. It just was sort of their standard $25 markdown off of guns in a certain price range, and so I bought this for $245. And I can't wait, like I said, to get it out on the range, put it through its paces, and a few hundred rounds later, I'll be coming back to you guys with a review. So I'm a second-rate shooter, but I'm a third-rate speaker. So thanks for sticking around till the end of the video.